In the dim glow of a Renaissance tailor's workshop, where candlelight danced on bolts of silk and damask, the corset was born. Not as a garment of oppression, no, not yet. It began as a whisper of innovation, a quiet promise to sculpt the human form into something divine, something eternal. The year was circa 1500, and Europe was drunk on ideals of symmetry and proportion, inspired by the rediscovery of classical Greek and Roman art. The body, they believed, could be molded to mirror the statues of antiquity, perfect, posed, and impossibly balanced. Enter the corset, a humble undergarment destined to become a cultural juggernaut. The word itself, corset, derives from the old French corps, meaning body, and it was exactly that, a second skin, crafted to reshape the one you were born with. Early corsets, or stays as they were often called, were less about beauty than function. They were rigid, utilitarian, built to support the spine and hold the posture of noble women who spent hours draped in heavy gowns. Whalebone, harvested from the jaws of the mighty leviathans of the sea, was the material of choice. Flexible yet unyielding, it was stitched into channels of linen or leather, creating a framework that promised structure. The wealthy adorned theirs with embroidery, gold thread glinting like a secret shared between wearer and maker. For the elite, the corset was a badge of status, a silent declaration of wealth and discipline. But whispers of beauty soon grew louder. By the late 16th century, the corset's purpose began to shift. No longer just a scaffold for heavy dresses, it became a tool to carve the body into the idealized silhouette of the era, the hourglass. The waist was cinched, the bosom lifted, the hips accentuated. Painters like Titian and sculptors like Donatello immortalized this form in art, and women, eager to embody the divine proportions of Venus herself, turned to the corset. It was no longer enough to wear beauty. One had to become it. The corset's rise was not without its architects. Catherine de' Medici, the formidable Queen of France, is often credited with popularizing the tightly laced silhouette in the mid-1500s. Her court set the standard, a waist so narrow seemed to defy nature, a figure that screamed control in an age of chaos. The corset became a symbol of power, but also paradox. It elevated women to the pedestal of idealized femininity, while binding them quite literally to society's expectations. A woman's worth was increasingly measured by the inches of her waist, and the corset was the ruler, yet this was only the beginning. The corset's grip tightened as it spread across Europe, from the opulent courts of Versailles to the modest parlors of London. It was a garment of contradiction. It promised freedom through beauty, but delivered constraint. For every noble woman who laced up to glide through a ballroom, there was a servant girl whose coarser chafed her skin as she scrubbed floors. The corset did not discriminate by class. It bound all who wore it to the same unforgiving ideal. As the 17th century dawned, the corset evolved. Steel replaced whalebone in some designs, offering even greater rigidity. Tailors became engineers of the human form, measuring and molding with mathematical precision. The garment was no longer a mere underlayer. It was a cultural artifact, a testament to humanity's obsession with control over nature, over the body, over desire itself. Women were taught to see their bodies as raw material, to be shaped and perfected through sacrifice. The corset whispered, You are not enough as you are, but we can fix you. This was the world the corset created, a world where beauty was a currency, and the cost was paid in breath, in comfort, in freedom. It was a world where a woman's silhouette could determine her destiny, where a few inches of whalebone could dictate her place in society. And yet, for all its promises, the corset carried a darker truth. Beneath the silk and bone, beneath the adoration of courtiers and the envy of peers, something vital was being crushed. The corset was no longer just a garment. It was a cage, and as the centuries turned, that cage would tighten, leaving marks not just on the body, but on the soul. This is where our story begins, in the flicker of a tailor's candle, in the quiet snap of whalebone, in the first whispered promise of perfection. The corset was born to shape the body, but it would go on to shape history itself. And as we step into the lives of those who wore it, you'll find that the cost of beauty was far greater than anyone could have imagined. Step into the morning chamber of a 17th century noblewoman, where the air is thick with the scent of lavender and the quiet rustle of silk. The day begins not with breakfast, but with the corset. A lady's maid, hands deft and practiced, pulls the laces taut, each tug a silent negotiation between duty and discomfort. The noble woman stands still, her breath shallow, her body yielding to the rigid embrace of whalebone and linen. This is no mere dressing ritual. It is a transformation, a daily surrender to the altar of elegance. The corset does not just shape the body, it reshapes life itself. For the women of this era, from the glittering courts of Paris to the somber manners of England, the corset was as inevitable as sunrise. It was the foundation of every outfit, the unseen architect of every gesture. To move, to sit, to breathe, all were dictated by its unyielding structure. A properly laced corset could reduce a waist to 18 inches or less, but the cost was immediate. Breathing became a luxury. Each inhale a careful sip of air. Eating was a challenge. A full meal could press against organs already displaced by the corset's grip, leading to nausea or fainting. Even speaking required strategy. Words were measured, delivered in soft, breathless tones, lest the effort tax the lungs too far. The corset's demands extended beyond the physical. It enforced a code of behavior, a choreography of restraint. A lady could not slouch, could not run, could not laugh too loudly without risking a snapped stay or a loosened lace. The corset was a constant reminder. You are being watched. You must be perfect. For noble women, this meant hours of standing in heavy gowns, their waists cinched to signal virtue and discipline. For servants, the corset was often a hand-me-down, patched and worn, but no less binding. It was a great equalizer in its cruelty, whether clad in silk or coarse wool. Every woman felt its weight. Yet there was a strange allure to this confinement. The corset promised transformation, a chance to transcend the ordinary and embody the divine in ballrooms, where candlelight gleamed off satin and jewels. A tightly laced waist was a currency of power. Men gazed, women envied, and the wearer stood taller figuratively, if not literally, in the knowledge that she had mastered her body. The corset was a paradox. It was pain disguised as prestige, sacrifice masquerading as strength. To wear it was to declare, I am more than my flesh, I am art. But art came at a price. The daily ritual of lacing was a battle, one fought in silence. Maids, often young girls themselves, bore the brunt of their mistress's frustrations. A lace pulled too tight could earn a scolding. Too loose, and the silhouette was ruined. Some women laced gradually, tightening over hours to ease the shock to their bodies. Others, eager for the smallest possible waist, endured tight lacing, a practice that pushed the body to its limits. Diaries from the period speak of women who could not sit for more than an hour, who fainted at dances, who woke each morning to bruises where bone met flesh. Yet they laced again the next day, driven by a society that equated beauty with virtue. The corset also shaped social interactions. Courtship, for instance, was a delicate dance made more complex by the garment's restrictions. A woman could not lean forward to whisper a secret or twirl too freely on the dance floor. Her movements were calculated, her grace a triumph of will over anatomy. Men, too, were complicit in this culture, praising the delicate figures of their beloveds while ignoring the pain behind the pause. The corset was a silent partner in every romance, dictating the distance between lovers, both physical and emotional. For those outside the elite, the corset was no less pervasive. Working women, seamstresses, shop girls, governesses wore simpler versions, often homemade, but the pressure to conform was universal. A respectable figure was a ticket to social mobility, a way to signal virtue in a world quick to judge. Yet, for these women, the corset was a double burden. It constrained their bodies while they toiled, their hands sewing the very garments that bound them. By the 18th century, the corset had become a cultural obsession, its silhouette etched into art, literature, and etiquette. It was no longer just a garment. It was a way of life. Women learned to navigate its restrictions, to breathe in sips, to eat in nibbles, to speak in whispers. They became masters of endurance, their bodies a canvas for society's ideals. But beneath the surface, something was stirring. The corset's grip was tightening, and with it, the toll on the body was becoming impossible to ignore. As we move deeper into this story, we'll uncover the hidden scars, physical and otherwise, that the corset left behind. Scars that would eventually spark a rebellion. Beneath the polished surface of a corseted silhouette lay a battlefield. The body, that miraculous machine of bone and breath, was at war with itself, reshaped, restrained, and, too often, broken. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the corset was no longer just a fashion statement. It was a force of nature, as relentless as gravity and as unforgiving as dogma. Its promise of beauty came at a cost that was measured not in coin, but in flesh, in organs, in lives. This is the story of the corset's hidden toll, a tale told from the inside out, where the price of perfection was paid in pain. The mechanics of the corset were deceptively simple. Whalebone or steel stays, laced tightly around the torso, compressed the waist to create the coveted hourglass figure. But the human body was not clay to be molded without consequence. The corset exerted pressure sometimes up to 80 pounds per square inch on the ribs, the spine, the lungs, and the digestive organs. To achieve a waist of 18 or even 15 inches, women endured what medical historians now call skeletal deformation. Ribs, flexible in youth, but brittle with age, could crack under the strain. The lower ribs, in particular, were forced inward, sometimes overlapping, creating a permanent cage around the lungs. Breathing was the first casualty. The corset restricted the diaphragm, limiting lung expansion to shallow upper chest breaths. Doctors of the era, though often complicit in the corset's reign, noted cases of corset-induced dyspnea, labored breathing that left women lightheaded or prone to fainting, romanticized in novels as a delicate feminine trait, was often a symptom of oxygen deprivation. Ballrooms with their heat and crowds became stages for collapse as women laced too tightly succumbed to the lack of air. The corset turned breath into a privilege, not a right. The digestive system fared no better. The stomach and intestines, compressed into unnatural shapes, struggled to function. Women reported chronic indigestion, nausea, and even vomiting after meals. The liver, pushed upward or downward depending on the corset's design, could become displaced, a condition known as floating liver. In extreme cases, the spleen or kidneys were similarly affected, leading to lifelong complications. Medical journals from the 19th century, though sparse, document cases of women whose organs were found adhered to one another, fused by the relentless pressure of tight lacing. The spine, too, bore the corset's weight. The natural S-curve of the vertebral column was forced into an exaggerated hourglass, leading to conditions like scoliosis or kyphosis in severe cases. Corsets, ironically designed to support posture, often weakened the back muscles by taking over their role. Women became dependent on the garment to stand upright, their own muscles atrophying from disuse. For young girls whose bodies were still growing, the consequences were even graver. Corsets worn during puberty could stunt skeletal development, leaving permanent deformities. Yet the medical establishment was slow to condemn the corset. Many doctors, products of their time, saw the garment as a necessary evil, a tool to enforce proper feminine posture. Some even argued it was beneficial, claiming it supported weak female constitutions. Those who dared criticize physicians like Dr. Samuel Horton in the 1830s were dismissed as alarmists. Society's obsession with the hourglass figure drowned out their warnings. Women were told the pain was temporary, the fainting a sign of refinement. Duty, after all, demanded sacrifice. The psychological toll was equally devastating. The corset was a constant reminder of inadequacy. A woman's worth was tied to her waistline, her value measured by how tightly she could lace. Diaries from the period reveal a quiet despair, women who wept as they laced, who hid bruises under their gowns, who longed to breathe freely, but feared the social cost. The corset was not just a physical constraint, it was a mental one, embedding the idea that a woman's body was never enough without alteration. For some, the corset's toll was fatal. Medical records, though incomplete, tell of women who died from punctured lungs, ruptured organs, or infections caused by corsets laced over open sores. Childbirth, already perilous, was made deadlier by corsets that prevented the abdominal muscles from functioning properly. Yet these tragedies were often hushed, attributed to female weakness rather than the garment itself. The corset was untouchable, a sacred relic of beauty's altar. As the 19th century progressed, whispers of dissent began to emerge. Reformers, armed with early medical evidence, started to question the corset's safety, but their voices were drowned out by fashion plates and society's relentless demand for perfection. The corset's grip was tightening, and with it the stakes were rising. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this obsession with elegance played out in the most intimate moments of life, love, marriage, and even death, where the corset's promise of beauty came at a heartbreaking cost. The corset was more than a garment. It was a gatekeeper to love, a prerequisite for marriage, a silent arbiter of a woman's worth. In the ballrooms and drawing rooms of the 18th and 19th centuries, where romance was choreographed with the precision of a minuet, the corset held court. It promised to transform a woman into the ideal bride, delicate, refined, her waist a testament to her virtue. But behind the silk and lace, the corset exacted a brutal toll. This is the story of love won and lives lost in the pursuit of elegance, where beauty's cruel promise led women to the altar and, too often, to the grave. Courtship in the corset's era was a performance, and the hourglass figure was the starring role. A tightly laced waist signaled discipline, chastity, and social standing, qualities that made a woman marriageable. Men, conditioned by art and literature, sought partners who embodied the Venus ideal, their waist cinched to impossible dimensions. Women, aware of the stakes, laced tighter, enduring pain to secure a proposal. The corset was their ally and their adversary, a tool to win love, but a barrier to living it. A suitor might praise a lady's delicate figure, unaware or uncaring that each breath she took was a battle. Weddings were the corset's ultimate stage. Brides, swathed in layers of tulle and satin, laced their corsets to the brink of collapse to achieve the perfect silhouette. Fashion plates from the 1850s show wedding gowns with waists as narrow as 16 inches, a feat that required hours of preparation and often a team of maids. The result was breathtaking, literally. Brides fainted at the altar, their lungs compressed, their bodies starved of oxygen. Some could not stand through the ceremony, leaning on grooms or fathers for support. The corset, meant to elevate their beauty, turned their wedding day into an ordeal. The stories are heartbreaking. In 1860, a London bride named Emily collapsed during her vows. Her corset laced so tightly her ribs punctured a lung. She died hours later, still in her gown. Such tragedies were not isolated. Medical journals, though reluctant to blame fashion outright, noted a rise in corset-related fatalities during the 19th century. Women died from organ failure, internal bleeding, or infections caused by stays that broke skin. Yet, these deaths were rarely reported as such. Society preferred euphemisms, heart failure, hysteria, to shield the corset's reputation. The corset's role in marriage extended beyond a wedding day. It shaped the expectations of wifely duty. A proper wife maintained her figure, even through pregnancy. When corsets were modified, but rarely abandoned, doctors warned against tight lacing during pregnancy, citing risks to both mother and child. But societal pressure prevailed. Women laced to conceal their condition, fearing judgment for appearing unrefined. The result was a spike in miscarriages and maternal mortality, as corsets restricted blood flow and compressed developing fetuses. The corset, once a symbol of love's triumph, became a silent saboteur of life. Even in the bedroom, the corset cast its shadow. Intimacy was constrained literally by the garment's presence. Some women slept in lighter corsets to maintain their shape, their bodies never free from the whalebone's grip. Husbands, conditioned to admire the hourglass, rarely questioned the pain behind it. The corset created a distance between lovers, a physical and emotional barrier that no amount of romance could fully bridge. Women were taught to prioritize appearance over comfort, to sacrifice their bodies for their husband's gaze. The corset's influence extended to the social fabric of marriage. A woman's silhouette was a public statement, a reflection of her husband's status. A wife who let her waistline expand risked gossip, accusations of sloth or rebellion. Fashion magazines like Godey's Ladies' Book reinforced this, publishing guides on correct lacing techniques alongside recipes and sewing patterns. The message was clear. Beauty was a duty, and the corset was its enforcer. Yet, not all women submitted quietly. Some, like the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, wrote privately of their hatred for the corset, describing it as a tyrant that stole their breath. Others, less famous, took small acts of defiance, loosening laces at home, refusing to tight lace for minor social events. These were the first cracks in the corset's armor, the earliest signs of a rebellion that would grow. But for now, the garment reigned supreme, its promise of elegance luring women into its deadly embrace. As we move forward, we'll meet the women who dared to challenge this tyranny, activists, artists, and ordinary rebels who began to unravel the stays. Their stories, born from pain and courage, would light the spark of change, proving that beauty could be reclaimed without sacrifice. The corset's reign was not eternal. By the late 19th century, its grip began to loosen not through force, but through the quiet courage of women who dared to question its necessity. These were not just reformers in starched collars, but artists, writers, and everyday women who saw the corset for what it was, a cage masquerading as elegance. This is the story of rebellion, of laces undone and voices raised, as women began to reclaim their bodies from the tyranny of the hourglass. The first whispers of dissent came from the margins. In 1851, Amelia Bloomer, an American activist, introduced bloomas, loose trousers that shocked society, but offered women freedom of movement. Though not a direct attack on the corset, bloomas challenged the idea that a woman's body must be constrained to be respectable. Bloomer's ideas, mocked by the press, planted a seed. Beauty could be practical, not painful. Her contemporaries, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, took up the cause, arguing that the corset was not just a garment, but a symbol of women's subjugation across the Atlantic. The Rational Dress Society, founded in 1881 in London, waged a more direct war. Led by women like Lady Florence Harberton, the society demanded clothing that allowed women to breathe, move, and work. They published pamphlets decrying the corset's health risks, citing medical evidence of deformed ribs and compressed organs. Their message was radical. A woman's body was her own, not society's to sculpt. The society's lectures drew crowds, but also scorn. Newspapers caricatured them as mannish women, their loose dresses mocked as unfeminine, yet their ideas took root, especially among working-class women who could no longer afford the corset's physical toll. Artists, too, joined the rebellion. The pre-Raphaelite painters of the 1850s, like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, depicted women in flowing, uncorseted gowns, their bodies natural and unconfined. These images, though romanticized, offered a counterpoint to the rigid silhouettes of fashion plates. Writers like Charlotte Bronte wove subtle critiques into their novels, describing heroines who chafed against the constraints of their clothing In Jane Eyre, Jane's plainness is a quiet rebellion against the corseted ideals of her time, her strength found in her mind, not her waistline. But the most powerful rebels were often ordinary women. In diaries and letters, we find stories of defiance. A schoolteacher who loosened her stays to breathe during lessons, a mother who refused to corset her daughters, a seamstress who designed dresses that didn't require tight lacing. These acts were small but seismic, chipping away at the corset's cultural dominance. By the 1890s, the health corset emerged, a looser, more flexible garment marketed as a compromise. It was a concession to the growing chorus of voices demanding change. The corset's decline was also fueled by science. As medical knowledge advanced, doctors like Dr. Arabella Kennelly published studies linking tight lacing to infertility, respiratory disease, and even death. These findings, once dismissed, gained traction in an era of growing female literacy. Women's magazines, once bastions of corset worship, began printing articles on sensible dress. The tide was turning, driven by women who refused to sacrifice their health for beauty. Yet the corset did not vanish quietly. Our society clung to it, and fashion houses like Worth and Redfern doubled down, designing gowns that demanded ever tighter waists. The rebellion faced resistance from those who saw the corset as a hallmark of refinement. Women who abandoned it risked social exile, labeled as radicals or worse. The battle was as much cultural as physical, a clash between tradition and progress. By the early 20th century, the corset's days were numbered. The rise of women's suffrage, coupled with the practical demands of World War I, accelerated its demise. Women working in factories or volunteering as nurses could not afford the corset's restrictions. New garments, like the brassiere, offered support without sacrifice. By 1920, the corset was largely relegated to history, a relic of a bygone era. But the rebellion was not just about discarding a garment. It was about redefining beauty, about asserting that a woman's value lay in her actions, her thoughts, her breath. The women who unraveled the stays activists, artists, and unsung heroines paved the way for a world where women could move freely, love fiercely, and live without apology. Their legacy is one of courage, a reminder that even the tightest bonds can be broken. As we turn to the final chapter, we'll explore the corset's ghost, its lingering influence in the shapewear and waist trainers of today. The question remains, have we truly freed ourselves, or are we still chasing the hourglass? The corset is gone, its whalebone and steel consigned to museum cases and costume dramas, yet its spirit lingers, woven into the fabric of modern beauty standards. From the catwalks of Paris to the Instagram feeds of Los Angeles, the pursuit of the hourglass figure endures, reborn in the form of shapewear and waist trainers. This is the story of how the corset's legacy survives in the 21st century, a soft but sobering reflection on whether we have truly unbound ourselves or simply traded one cage for another. The corset's decline in the early 20th century was a triumph of rebellion, but it did not erase society's obsession with the perfect silhouette. By the 1950s, girdles, elastic successors to the corset, promised the smooth and sculpt without the bone-breaking rigidity. Dior's new looks celebrated cinched waists, and women, fresh from the freedom of wartime trousers, were once again encouraged to reshape their bodies. The girdle was softer, yes, but its message was familiar. Your body, as it is not enough. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the corset's ghost has a new name, the waist trainer. Popularized by celebrities like Kim Kardashian and fitness influencers on social media, waist trainers are elastic, latex or neoprene garments designed to compress the waist, promising a slimmer figure with daily wear. Marketed as tools for fitness and confidence, they echo the corset's sole promise: transformation through constraint. Instagram posts with their hashtags and filters show women cinch into hourglass perfection, their smiles masking the discomfort of restricted breathing and movement. But the parallels are unsettling. Like the corset, waist trainers exert pressure on the ribs and organs, raising concerns among doctors. Studies, though limited, suggest risks similar to those of tight lacing, digestive issues, weakened core muscles, and even rib deformation in extreme cases. Fitness experts warn that waist trainers do not burn fat or build muscle. They merely compress, creating an illusion of change. Yet the allure persists, fueled by a culture that equates a tiny waist with success, beauty, and discipline. The modern beauty industry, much like its 19th century counterpart, thrives on this illusion. Shapewear brands like Spanx and Skims dominate the market, offering garments that smooth, lift, and contour. Unlike the corset, these are marketed as empowering, a choice rather than a mandate. But the pressure to conform remains. Social media amplifies it, with algorithms rewarding images of idealized bodies. Women, scrolling through curated feeds, feel the same weight their corseted ancestors did: the weight of expectation, the weight of inadequacy. Yet there are glimmers of resistance. Body positivity movements, led by activists like Yamila Jamil, challenge the need for shapewear, advocating for self-acceptance over alteration. Fitness influencers like Kayla Signs promote strength over size, encouraging women to prioritize health over aesthetics. These voices echo the rational dress society of the 1880s, reminding us that rebellion is cyclical, a constant push against the tide of conformity. The corset's legacy also lives in fashion's nostalgia. Designers like Vivienne Westwood and Alexander McQueen have reimagined the corset as outerwear, a symbol of defiance rather than submission. Celebrities at the Met Gala don corset-inspired gowns, their laces a nod to history rather than a daily reality. But even these artistic tributes carry a warning. The corset's allure is seductive, its promise of control evergreen. So, have we unbound ourselves? The answer is both yes and no. The corset, as it was, is gone, its physical cruelty a relic. But its spirit, its demand that women reshape themselves to fit an ideal, lingers in the waist trainers, the filters, the endless scroll of perfection. The rebellion that began with Amelia Bloomer and Lady Harberton continues, but it is not complete. Every time a woman chooses comfort over constraint, strength over silhouette, she unravels another lace, loosening the grip of history. This story, from whalebone to waist trainers, is a reminder of beauty's cost and the courage it takes to redefine it. The corset taught us that perfection is a cage, but it also taught us that cages can be broken. The question now is ours to answer. Will we choose to breathe freely, or will we lace ourselves back into the same old shape? Thank you for listening. If this story stirred your thoughts or lulled you gently to sleep, consider subscribing for more tales from the shadows of history. What beauty standard from the past fascinates or frightens you the most? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and share if this brought peace or curiosity to your night.